Reviewing our webinar sponsored by Simon's VIP Connect titled, All I Really Need is an iPad, Right? Myths and Realities of iPads for Families of Individuals with Special Needs. My name is Bethany Smith-Packard, one of the genetic counselors for Simon's VIP Connect, and I am joined by Dr. Kelly Johnson, licensed clinical psychologist at the University of Washington Autism Center in Seattle, Washington. At the UW Autism Center, Dr. Johnson provides diagnostic evaluations, individual therapy, and family consultation. She is also involved in research as well as training activities. Dr. Johnson brings a broad range of clinical experience working with individuals with special needs and their families, including very young children through adults. In addition to working with gifted and highly capable populations, her clinical and supervisory experience has also involved individuals with neurodevelopmental disabilities, medical problems, and psychiatric conditions. Dr. Johnson has led the UW Autism Center's Autism Interactive project, which, with the help of a donation from Easter Seals, was a pilot project involving the use of iPads with children who have autism spectrum disorder. During this presentation, Dr. Johnson will share lessons learned through this iPad pilot project. This will include important considerations before deciding to buy an iPad for your child, as well as guidelines for making the iPad even more helpful for your child. It will also include brief video demonstrations of several different apps, as well as the new guided access capability on newer iPads. Finally, she will provide numerous resources related to using the iPad with individuals who have special needs. After viewing the presentation, we invite you to submit any questions you have for Dr. Johnson to the Simon's VIP coordinator email, which is coordinator@simonsvipconnect.org. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Johnson. I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Great, very much, Bethany. I've had the privilege of working with several SVIP families here at the University of Washington in the past and other Simons Foundation projects, so I appreciate being invited to give this webinar on such a timely topic as the iPad. I also have the privilege here at the University of Washington of working with a multidisciplinary team of professionals. And one of my esteemed colleagues, Joe Risto, is a speech-language pathologist who helped greatly in putting together the content of this webinar and in taping some of the video demonstrations that we'll be showing. So I imagine that many of you watching this webinar have probably heard stories in the media about the miracle of the iPad for people with special needs. And perhaps you're thinking of getting an iPad for your child, or if you already have one, maybe you're wondering if you can increase the functionality of the iPad for your child. So we've organized this presentation around 9 common myths that we've encountered in our work in actually using the iPad with families of children with, in particular, autism spectrum disorders and related neurodevelopmental conditions. Before we actually delve into the myths, a few points that I want to review. First of all, I want to make a disclosure here. We have no gain, financial or otherwise, reason for you either to buy an iPad or for you to purchase any particular apps. In a similar vein, we're not formally endorsing the iPad or any of the apps that we are going to demonstrate for you, or even any of the resources that we're going to provide for you. Ultimately, the content of this webinar really belongs to the presenters, so Joe and I, based on our clinically informed opinions and experience in working with several families. And the content also comes with a couple of warning labels. One is that the apps that we are going to demonstrate in this webinar, they may or may not be appropriate for your child. We're really trying to give you a taste of what's out there and some of the range of applications of some different apps. But the ones that we demonstrate may or may not be suited to your particular child. And of course, we know that technology is continuing to change very, very quickly. So there's going to be new content, new devices, new apps, all kinds of things that are going to come out after this webinar is actually taped and presented. So please be mindful that there's going to be new information that may be of use to your child. However, a lot of the lessons that we're going to talk about are really timeless and applicable to you and your child in the future. So let's go ahead and proceed. All right, myth number 1. I better get the newest iPad, or it doesn't matter which iPad I get. Well, the reality is that it's going to be important for you to think about what the different features are that are available with different iPads that are out there or will be out there in the future. And there's several different features that are particularly important to pay attention to. That includes the physical size of the device, the capacity of what information can be held on the device, available features that are built in, of course, expense, and more. So let's consider each of these in turn. So the physical size. Now, there are different sizes of iPads available right now. We have the full size, which is a little over 7 inches this direction, a little over 9 inches this direction. And very recently, the iPad mini has come out, which is a little over 5 inches across and almost 8 inches. Now, some of you may also consider other iDevices that are available right now, like the iPad Touch or the iPhone. Many of the apps that are available and some of the built-in features will cross all of these devices, but not all of them will. So how do you decide if you're thinking about these different sizes of iPads or related devices? Well, here's a table that gives you some ideas of considerations when you are thinking about what will match your child in particular, specifically related to the physical size of the iPad device. So think about your child's hearing abilities. How might the size of the device impact that factor of your child's abilities? A smaller device generally is going to have less volume when it comes to the speakers. A larger device is going to have more volume. Now, there are some add-ons that we'll talk about later that can help you mitigate the issue of having a smaller device. Consider also your child's vision capabilities. A smaller device is, of course, going to have a smaller screen. Is your child going to be able to see the content of what's on a screen if it's one of those smaller devices? If not, it may be worthwhile to consider the larger full-size iPad. Think also about your child's motor skills. What type of motor control do they have? The smaller device is going to require more fine motor skills because you're going to have more fine-tuned movements that are necessary in order to navigate what's going on in the screen. The larger device can be a little bit more forgiving in that respect. And then, of course, how is your child going to be using the iPad? Is it helpful to have a smaller device that is more portable, easier to carry around? That may mean it also is easier to lose, depending on if there's a safe spot that your child is automatically going to keep the smaller device. A smaller device may also have a longer battery life than the larger device. So those are some of the considerations in regard to physical size and what you might want to think about in regard to your child's needs. Another feature that is important when you're selecting which iPad or device to get is the actual storage capacity. Now, right now, the newer iPads and related devices, and by newer, I mean the iPad 2 and later devices, iPad 3 and the iPad mini, and the later iPhones and iTouches, those are available in storage capacity of 16 megabytes, gigabytes, 32 gigabytes, and 64 gigabytes. Now, how much are all of those categories of size? Well, if we think about 16 gigabytes, which is the smallest at this point that you could get, That's the equivalent of the storage for about 20 hours of video or 7,000 songs, or for those of you that are familiar with the popular game Angry Birds, it would be about 700 copies of that game. Well, how do you decide how much storage you really need? We've provided some resources here where you can try to help figure out how much memory you really need for your child on the iPad, as well as some alternatives. If you end up with a smaller storage capacity, there are other ways that you might be able to store information on the cloud or on other computers, and this will give you some other options in that regard. Other features that are important to consider are features that are actually built into the iPad. Now, different iPads will have different capabilities, and this is something to consider before you get an iPad or before you decide which of the iDevices that you may or may not get. So what do you really want your child to have available to them with this device? Is it important for them to have the capability to talk on the phone, in which case you will probably be thinking about something more like an iPhone at this point that would also be able to have apps on it. Some of the advantages of having the phone capability would be that you don't have to keep track of a phone and your iPad device. And that, of course, if you're in an emergency, that might be helpful just to have everything all included in one device. And maybe that would also contribute to helping your child with building social interactions if they have the phone capability on that one device. Well, what comes with more capabilities on devices? Oftentimes that requires more supervision on your part as a parent. And if it's a phone, you'll probably need to have a cell phone plan or data plan in order to make that active in a capability. Another feature that is worth considering, whether you want your child to have this capability, is accessibility or access to the internet or Wi-Fi. Now, that would be very helpful for being able to download or upload photos into the iPad or other resources, or maybe being able to have your child, who might be an older child, accessing social networking sites that might be available to keep in contact with family members or friends they may have made. And it makes it easier to download apps and other online features that you need the internet for. Once again, the potential cons for that is that it's going to require more parental monitoring. And again, if you're going to access the internet, you need to be able to have Wi-Fi capability. And if you want that wherever you go, you may need to purchase a data plan, or else you'll need to be in some location that is offering Wi-Fi. Another really important feature to think about when you're deciding among different iPad options is whether or not you will get an iPad or device that has a built-in camera, both for still shots as well as videotaping. Now, this is a particularly helpful feature if you can get an iPad with a camera capability, and those come with iPad 2 and later versions. There is not a camera on the original first-generation iPad. And the camera is really helpful for being able to personalize apps, creating visual schedules, just being able to use things that are more concrete and specific to your child. And if there's a camera, that may be also a way to increase social interaction, for example, sharing pictures with friends and family. Once again, the downside of that, maybe the downside is that it's going to require more monitoring because of the possibility of what pictures might be taken, of course. So in thinking about these different built-in features and trying to make meaningful comparisons, we've provided a couple of different websites or links for you to follow up on if you're interested. Now, of course, another feature in deciding which iPad is going to be expense. And unlike more dedicated communication devices, and by dedicated communication devices, we mean devices that are used only for communication and not other things, the health insurance companies in the United States, at least, are not usually paying for the iPad. And that's because the iPad can be used not only for assisting with communication, but it can be used for a variety of other purposes. And so insurance companies are viewing it potentially as an entertainment device and not necessarily something that your child absolutely needs in order to improve the quality of their life. So right now, the different price ranges for iPad devices really in about the $200 to $800 or more dollar price range. This is as of November 2012. Although I recently just saw the option to purchase a first-generation original iPad 1 for $179. So these prices are going to change over time and hopefully in the direction of going down. One of the things to think about for price is that for every range of increasing your storage capacity, so going back to that 16, 32, and 64 gigabyte storage capacity options, every time that you go up one level, at this point it's adding on approximately $100. Again, those prices might change over time, but that's why we're even considering how much storage you would need, because it impacts the cost of the device. Now, there are different ways that you might be able to figure out to get an iPad device for your child. So you may consider looking at a refurbished device, so not a brand new iPad, but one that has been put back together and brought up to speed, and that often will give you a discount of 10 to 25% over what a new iPad device would cost. Another option that some families consider is applying for funding from different organizations, and here is a link if you're interested in finding out about some of those organizations. I know that last week Autism Speaks actually put out an offer for people to apply for a grant for an iPad. So those continue to be made available. And then you might consider, when it comes to gifting for your child, as people are asking, well, what can I get them for the holidays or for birthdays? You might request that there are Apple Store gift cards instead of getting toys or clothes for your child. All right, let's go on to myth number 2. There are no extras I'll need to get for the iPad. Well, the reality is we're going to encourage you to think about some extras. And those are going to include a protective case, iPad insurance, and different accessibility add-ons. So let's consider each of those in turn. Protective case. Very strongly encourage you to take a look at what cases are available, because the iPad is a device that could easily get broken or misplaced or lost, whether that's in a fit of upset that something happens with the iPad or just accidental. And there are a number of different cases out there. We've provided some links for you to look at what's available. Again, there are going to be new possibilities being offered all the time in terms of protective cases. I've shown you a couple of pictures here of some of the differences that are out there right now. This one here in the bottom left part of your screen shows an iPad that has these 4 kind of rubber balls on the corners. And that's one way of potentially protecting the iPad and still giving you access to some of the ports and things that are available on the side of the iPad. And I think many people consider very sturdy iPad covers like is pictured on the bottom right here, that really can help withstand some pretty rough wear and tear. There are also protective cases out there that help if your iPad were to get wet, or if you have a child that may have difficulty with saliva control. That might be something that would be important, not just considering whether the iPad is going to be going outside in the elements, but also if that's something that your child struggles with in terms of controlling saliva and how that might get onto the screen. Now, iPad insurance. Now, we're not suggesting that you absolutely should get insurance for your iPad, but we want you to know that it is available. And while Consumer Reports magazine recently recommended not getting insurance for iPads and related devices, they weren't really taking into consideration people who may be using it who have special needs and may be having increased wear and tear on the iPad itself, or for whom it is an incredibly important device for functioning or communicating with people around them. So the possibility that the iPad gets lost or damaged might really impact your child on a daily basis. In that case, insurance may be something that you really want to consider. And there are different options out there. There are several actually, and there's an article that we have the link to at the bottom of this screen that discusses some of these options. And they include things like contacting your homeowners or renters insurance to find out whether there would be coverage for your iPad device. There are some credit cards that have specific protection for devices like this. And more recently, there are even some companies that are coming out just to insure technology. One example of that is SquareTrade. We're not endorsing them, but that is one example of one of these new companies that is offering insurance for iPad and other types of technology devices. Then a very important extra to consider is how can you make the iPad more functional or more accessible for your child. And there, first of all, are a number of built-in accessibility options, things that are built into the iPad already. And those are things that it's really worthwhile to explore and find out about on the different iPads that are out there. One of the built-in accessibility options is called VoiceOver. It's a screen reader, so it's really intended for people that have vision problems, but it could also be used for your child if they really could benefit from increased verbal cues. So this VoiceOver feature allows you to touch different parts of the screen and then hear what's located in that particular part of the screen. So rather than just having to see it, you can hear what's there, what's in the top right corner or the bottom left corner, etc. And the VoiceOver screen reader is actually available in 36 different languages. So if your family speaks something other than English, you could use the VoiceOver screen reader without having to purchase anything extra. The VoiceOver screen reader also allows you to adjust the speaking rate. So if you want the screen reader to talk more slowly, if your child needs a longer time to process verbal input, that's an adjustment that you can make. And VoiceOver screen reader also has a zoom feature that allows you to magnify what's on the screen, making it larger. And it's also possible to enlarge the text that's on the iPad screen. So those are some really helpful built-in accessibility features of the iPad. Then it's also possible to purchase various accessibility options. And here's a link on the screen to show you some of those different add-on tools that are available. And I'll just highlight a few pictures that I've shown you here. So in the bottom left corner of the screen right now is an example of what's called a key guard. And that is used primarily if your child is using the iPad as a communication device. And it gives additional protection for the iPad screen and also helps them to navigate which part of the words that they're wanting to use to express themselves using the iPad. The picture in the middle here on the screen shows a few different types of stylus devices, which is essentially like a pen that you use on the screen. And they come in different weights and shapes, so that's a consideration that you don't want to just get any stylus. You want to look at what's going to best match your child. There are even some styluses available that you can have it molded to your child's actual grip. A stylus can be really helpful if your child's working on handwriting because it transfers over to a pencil or a pen much more easily than writing with your fingertip. And for some individuals, a stylus can actually help them use the touch screen more easily if they have some difficulty with controlling a finger point. And then in the bottom right corner of this slide, you can see an example of, those are actually speakers that can be attached with super Velcro, if you want to the iPad. And that would allow stronger voice output particularly from communication apps, so that there would be a higher volume than just what is built into the iPad speakers. And that might be a way to increase the volume if you decided to get a smaller device rather than the full-size iPad. But there are a lot of different other add-ons available: keyboards, switches, mounts. So, for example, if you were going to want to mount the iPad to, for example, a wheelchair, there are stands available for holding the iPad at optimal angles. There are lap desks. One example is shown here in the top part of this slide. That's a lap desk that also includes a way to keep the iPad from slipping off and on of the little desk there. Okay. Now we're moving on to myth number 3. Once I buy the iPad, I'll just hand it to my kid and watch the progress happen. Well, this is what we wish would happen, but the reality is actually quite a bit different. And this was really a big lesson that we learned in our iPad project here, is how important it is to have expert guidance when you're trying to figure out how to use the iPad most effectively with your child. And it's not just the child that needs potentially some direct instruction. Often it's the parent or the caregiver. Someone to really help set up goals. What is the way you're going to use the iPad? What apps are you going to select, and how are you going to use them in the effort of accomplishing specific goals? It's easy to buy an iPad and just look at different entertainment options, and there's some value in that. But if you really want to extend the use and functionality of the iPad, it's incredibly helpful to get some guidance from professionals in particular who have expertise in using the iPad with children. And that may be a speech-language pathologist or an occupational therapist. There may be a teacher, or in some respects, you may get more information from a skilled parent or caregiver who's had a lot of experience in actually using the iPad with his or her own child. Now, the apps that are available for the iPad and related devices now can be useful for all kinds of goals and functions. And this is where the exciting part really comes when we're thinking about the iPads. We can use apps and even the built-in capability of the iPad to address all kinds of goals. So your child's communication self-regulation, trying to help with managing transitions between different activities during the day, managing frustration and emotions, increasing social interaction, supporting educational skills and academic achievement, leisure pursuits. It's important that our children also are able to entertain themselves or involve themselves with other people during downtime as well, not just during our highly structured teaching times. The iPad has lots of apps that can help support an individual in their vocation or job pursuits. We've used the iPad as a means of distraction during medical procedures, when a shot's being given or blood's being drawn. It can be a very powerful distractor during that time. Really, the possibilities are endless, and this is the exciting part of what's possible with the iPad. Let's get our first taste of looking at some specific apps. Now, a reminder to you that we are not telling you should go and get these apps that we're demonstrating or formally endorsing them, but we do want to give you a chance to see some of what's out there, a range of different apps that you might want to consider, and to think about the different functions and goals that you might use the apps for. So let's take a look first at an app called Answers HD.
So this is a YesNo HD app. It's called Answers HD, and it's basically just a very simple communication app that you can use with children who are just beginning to learn to communicate or beginning to learn to communicate using something like the iPad. This is the main screen, and you can see it's just two buttons, one that says yes, one that says no. So again, this can teach basic cause-effect communication, and you can use it in a variety of different ways. YesNo is the default, but you can set up favorites, and you can set up lesson plans that allow you to program in your own words. So for instance, if you're doing an activity teaching more and all done, you can set up these two choices. Another thing that you can do is set up these lesson plans. So if you have sequential lessons that you're teaching that all use two choices, for example, she and he, you could set them up this way. You can also edit these buttons by going to this screen, and you can choose whether to include a picture, what color the button will be, what color the text will be, and then you can record your own text. So again, this is Answers HD, just a really simple app to help with communication at a beginning level. So this app is a literacy app. It's called First Words Deluxe, and it's labeled as FW Deluxe on the icon. There are a million different literacy apps out there, so this is just one of many, but it's got some nice features. First, I'll just show you how it works. The child can go in, and there's a picture and a word,
G,
and as simple as that.
D-O-G, dog.
It has a lot of different options. So this is basically just whether you want it in English or not. Game options is what gives you real power. So you can change the order of presentation of the words from alphabetical to random to shortest words to longest words. You can also change the length of the longest word anywhere from 3 letters, so like we saw dog, all the way up to 10 letters. So depending on what level your child is working at. You can change the letter order, and this is how the child clicks and drags the letters up to spell the word. You can let them do it in any order, so they could spell it OGD, or you can set it so they have to do it from the left to right spelling order. Letter hints is you can have kind of shadow letters appear in the spaces where the letters are dragged to in order to give a child more support as they're learning how to spell. You can turn it on or off. You can change the case of the letters, so uppercase, lowercase, or capitalized. You can also change whether you have any audio capacity for this. We have it on, so you heard the spelling of the word as after we spelled it. You can also have it say the word on the target word on entry, so it would have said dog immediately and given the child that auditory feedback before they started spelling. And then this is the spelling speed after you spell the word, how quickly it moves on to the next word. You can change the font, and then you can change whether it automatically, after you finish the word, goes on to the next one. So that's about it. Like I said, there are a lot of really great literacy apps out there, and this is just one of them.
So let's go in now to myth number 4. Myth number 4 is free apps are bad, or expensive apps are clearly the best choice. Well, the reality is that there are lots of very good apps out there, and whether they are free or whether they are expensive, that's not the way to make the determination about whether you should use a particular app or get a particular app for your child. What you really want to do is think about ways that you may do what we call feature matching. And that means that you're going to consider what features are available on a particular app. So, for example, what we just highlighted in that last demonstration of that literacy app, you can have a child that may need a bit more support and prompting with some visual cues, or you may need some additional auditory cues. You want to know what level of support a particular app offers and how that matches what your child's needs are for particular goals. And we've included a couple of different links that really consider apps from this standpoint of feature matching. Now, there are a number of free apps out there that are excellent. One thing that we learned as we used some free apps is that some people who offer free apps will have what's called in-app purchases, so that once you're inside the app and using it, something pops up that says, do you want to purchase such and such? And that's the way that they potentially get you to pay some money for an app that seems as though it's free. So it's important to be aware that that's one thing that may happen, not just with free apps, that can also happen with paid apps. And on the other side, an expensive app may or may not be appropriate for your child. Just because it's expensive doesn't mean that it's going to be a good match for what your child's needs are. That's really going to be the bottom line for all of what we're talking about. We need to match the apps and the technology to your child. So use your child as the guide. Don't go just what on the marketing is. The marketing's there to sell it to you, not necessarily to match to what your child needs. If you're not sure how to make those decisions, you can talk with your child's professional, their speech-language pathologist or psychologist or your teacher and so forth. And think about how the iPad is being used. Is it largely a communication device to help your child express his or her needs? Or are you using it largely as a reinforcer, so as a reward for doing something in their everyday environment? Let's take a look at a couple of different apps that highlight some of the differences that might be available if you get an app for free or if you're going to go ahead and get one that you purchase. The first app that we're going to show you is called Model Me Kids, and this is one that, at least at this point in time, is available for free, and it works on providing some visual supports and social stories for children. The second app that we're going to demonstrate is called Pictello, and this is an app that would be purchased. At this point in time, I believe it's $18.99, but it turns out that the prices for apps can also vary over time. So let's take a look at the differences that might be evident in this app that is free and has a lot of strengths as compared to one that we're going to purchase and offers more flexibility.
This app is called Model Me Going Places, and the little icon, it just says Going Places. Let's open it up. This app provides you with 6 pre-made social stories in which it demonstrates a young child in the community in these various situations and the different steps along the way in each situation and how the child is managing themselves in each of the situations. So let's go ahead, I'll show you which ones we have. They have hairdresser, which is a child going and getting his hair cut, visiting the mall with a parent, going to the doctor with a parent, visiting the playground and encountering other children, going to the grocery store with a parent, and going to the restaurant with family members. Let's go ahead and just open up one of these so we can see a demonstration.
I'm getting a haircut.
So you press the button in the lower right corner to advance the page.
I wait my turn quietly. I sit and wear a cape. This is the hairdresser. I sit very still for him. The hairdresser wets my hair. This feels good. He cuts my hair with scissors. He uses clippers too. All done. That was easy. Thanks. I like my haircut. See you next time.
And then you can go back to the main page here by pressing a button in the top left corner that looks like a house. And it brings you back to the other options here. So this app gives you the opportunity to show your child what to expect in some different situations that are common in their lives. And you could show it to them right before you visit the situation as a way to prime them for what to expect and to remind them of what behaviors might be expected in those situations. And since you'd have the iPad with you, they can also look through the story while they're in the waiting room or as you're moving along in that situation.
So this is an app called Pictello. Right now it's $18.99 in the iTunes store, but those prices are subject to change. So Pictello is basically similar to Model Me Places, which is another app that we have shown today. It's used for social stories, and you can use your own pictures and voice recordings to make all sorts of different albums and photo stories to support your child. It's completely customizable though. There are a few sample stories that are already preloaded, but you can make any story you want using this application. We're going to use one of the sample stories as a demonstration. So you can see at this very beginning screen, I'll actually go back. This is where the stories are stored. You can do a couple of different things along the bottom here. You can add a new story, you can add a new folder, which are these kind of long white things right here. You can also change some of the settings from this page. One of the neat things that you can do, so Pictello has what's called text-to-speech, where it will read what you type in using a synthesized voice. You can actually download a whole bunch of different voices using this app. And you can also use different languages, which is pretty neat. And there's just this big long list of voices that you can use. So that is one of the great features of this app. So going back to one of the stories itself, this is one of the preloaded stories that comes with the app. And we'll just show you a little demonstration of what a story can look like. So this is the title page, and you can click
What I Like by Josh Harris
to hear the text-to-speech voice that I was talking about. So again,
These are things I like.
clicking through, and you can have text above and below the picture.
I really like my iPod. It's always with me.
So you can keep going just all the way
I
through
like
this.
my iMac.
And just to show you how you can kind of make your own picture or your own stories, up here is the edit button. You hit that and then touch one of your stories, and you can hit edit story. From here you can also export or send these stories as PDFs or as a Pictello file. We're going to edit this one. And you have two choices when you're editing. You can either use a wizard, which makes making a new story a little bit easier, or you can use the expert, which allows you to have a little more freedom in how you're editing. So we're going to use the expert. Here you can change the voice, so if you've downloaded different voices, you
Hello.
can choose which one you want
My
to
name is
use
Josh.
for the story.
I am one of the...
You can choose how the pages turn, which is called transitions. This is also where you can record your own speech to tell the story. You just hit this button, and it's a really simple interface to record. And then you can go through and do all of these options for each one of the pages in your story. So again, this is a really versatile app. Some of the things that you might be able to do is if you have a young child who's just beginning to speak, you can kind of do a family album and teach them mama and dada and names of important people in their life. You can do the social stories, just like Model Me places, to help children prepare for different situations. You can also show steps for a multi-step task, use it as a memory book if you went on a recent vacation, or to commemorate a loss or a difficult time. You can use it to show steps in a fear hierarchy when working on facing a new fear or an unfamiliar situation. Really, there's just endless possibilities with this one.
Okay, well, let's move on now to myth number 5. So, myth number 5 is apps made for people with autism or other special needs are the only ones that will be helpful for my child. Well, the reality of that is there are many apps that are not geared specially to people with special needs that may match your child's needs very, very well. What you want to do, as always, is consider your child's strengths, what their weaknesses might be, and, of course, the goals that you're trying to work on. There's a nice listing of different apps available on this link that we provide here that you might consider taking a look at. We've already looked at the First Words Deluxe app, the FW Deluxe app, earlier in this webinar. That's an example of an app that's just a mainstream app out there that can work on early literacy skills and phonics and basic vocabulary. And we're going to show you a couple of other apps right now that are also mainstream apps out there, not specifically geared toward people with special needs, but can absolutely be used for meeting a variety of goals for your child. So let's take a look at one is called Toca Boca Birthday Party, and another one is the familiar Dr. Seuss Cat in the Hat book, and we'll see how these iPad apps might be used potentially for working on particular goals for your child.
There are a series of apps by a company called Toca Boca, and we're going to show you one of them. It's called Toca Boca Birthday Party.
Toca boca.
So Toca Boca Birthday Party helps you go through the different scenes that might happen in a birthday party. And it's a nice way to work on things like pretend play, turn taking, understanding what the expected behaviors are during a familiar routine like a birthday party. And so we're going to bring in a couple of kids to actually demonstrate how this particular app works. Come on in and join me, girls.
Yay. Happy. You pick the plates. Is it good? Very delicious. Would you like some more punch? Yes, please. Would you like some more cake? Let's open the present now. Can I open it? Sure. Wait. Grand finale. Cha-cha. Yay. Ah, that's cool. Yum. Time to wash the dishes. Let's replay.
Thank you. Nice job, girls.
Can I play it again?
There are lots of apps for the iPad that are familiar books, some of which you can get for free and some of which you can purchase. We purchased this one, The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss. And let's show you some of the capabilities for this app. So let's press Read to Me.
The sun did not shine. It was too wet to play. So we sat in the house all that cold, cold, wet day.
So I don't know if you can tell on the screen, but as the narrator is reading each word, it's highlighted in red to help the person watching to track how far you're going along in the sentence. And then you swipe to the next page.
I sat there with Sally. We sat there, we two. And I said, how I wish we had something to do.
So this continues on through the whole book, and some other features are that you can touch different parts of the picture, and that word will be said aloud and shown in print.
Sat.
And
Play.
some of them may or may not always be the word that you might think would come up as you press, but that's some additional opportunity for practicing some early literacy skills. And when you want to get back to the main page, there's an arrow in the bottom left corner that brings up some options here. So some of the options within the Read to Me part of this app is voice. We'll press that icon. Right now we have the narrator that comes with the app that reads the story. But you can also record your own voice or a grandparent's voice or your child reading it. And so you would press on New.
Record a new voice. Enter a name below. Save. Cancel.
So it walks you through pretty nicely and easily how to record your own voice. So you type in the voice, so let's say it might be Grandma, and then you would save it. I'm going to cancel now. And then you can choose that new person to go ahead and do the voice output for the story. So some other options that are available, we're going to press the options button down here, and you can enable or disable some of these different choices here. One is read to me, and that just has the whatever narrator or person you have reading aloud. If you wanted to disable that perhaps partway through a story, you could do that. There's an option of sound effects. I don't know if you noticed that there's the sound of rain in the background on the story at the beginning here, and some other sound effects. So if you find that that is distracting for your child, that you could disable that part. You can also disable that option that I showed you when we're touching a picture and it tells you what the word is. If that was also distracting for your child, you could disable that. And then there is read alerts. And we're actually not sure what that is. Sometimes you'll come across some capabilities in an app where it's a bit hard to figure out what it is, but it still has a lot of good options available here. So let's go back to, I'm going to press home and show there's also the option for your child to read the book him or herself. I press read it myself. And the text is shown. And the child can read it out loud to you or read it to himself or herself. And there's the option of pressing each word.
The.
And as the word is pressed, there's
Sun.
the voice output
Did.
for each of those
Not.
words,
Shine.
in case you needed a little bit of help or reminder or confirmation about whether that word was correct. So I'm going to go back again to the main pages here. One of the other options is if you want to go to a particular part within a story, you can click on the pages icon and go through to that particular page where you want to bring up. And it'll take you right there. Okay. So I think those are the main parts of, oh, and there's one more, the autoplay. Press that.
Autoplay reads to you and turns the pages. Use the home button to quit. Okay. Cancel.
So this allows you the story just to be read, and again you can choose which voice that you want. But I'm going to go ahead and cancel for now. And that is The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss.
All right, let's move on now. So myth number 6. I have to buy a whole bunch of apps to get anything useful. Well, fortunately, that's not true. The reality is that there are a lot of built-in capabilities in the iPad, and we made reference to some of them earlier in this webinar. So, for example, the camera and the video camera that's built into iPads that are at least iPad 2 or later on. Even if you do get an original iPad, the first generation iPad, and don't have a camera or a video camera built in, there are options that you can use to be able to download pictures that you might take with a camera. You can use a program called Dropbox, and that will allow you to take pictures with a camera and download them to even the first generation iPads. Well, other features that are already built in to the iPad that doesn't require buying separate apps are things like reminders and calendar. So particularly for if your child is older and is actually utilizing a daily calendar like you as a parent might use, this can be a nice way of providing that visual support and organization and executive functioning support for keeping track of daily tasks and what is happening each step of the day with a visual cue and reminder. Now, there is actually a separate feature called Reminders that will allow either a visual pop-up on the screen to remind your child of something that they need to do. perhaps taking medication or need to go pay a visit to the bathroom or something. That reminder can pop up with a little visual cue, and there's even the option of an audible cue. So you can pick different sounds that might alert your child to then check the screen and find out, oh, it's time for me to take my medicine. So those are features that can be really, really helpful, especially for children who are older. There is something called iBooks, which you can use for downloading all kinds of books. You can get a variety of free books as well as books that you might purchase, but you can use the iPad for your child to be reading books. There is FaceTime, which is the opportunity to do a video, basically online chat. If any of you have used things like Skype, this is that version. So you could work on helping your child keep in contact with other family members or have a way to kind of meet up with other kids when not actually seeing them in person. And then, of course, there's the entire access to the Internet that the iPad can offer if you have that functionality for Wi-Fi. And the Internet, of course, opens up all kinds of possibilities. I know even for you looking for different resources related to getting apps or getting the iPad, you would access that through the Internet. If you're interested in exploring perhaps how to use different apps, we often actually go and check YouTube, and we'll look up on YouTube. There are some people that actually post video demonstrations of different apps, similar to what we've shown you here for some of the apps. So all kinds of possibilities with these built-in features from the iPad. And then when it comes to actually purchasing apps, some of that decision-making, those factors that can be really important in that regard are thinking about the range of functions that a particular app might be able to address. Might want to think about also the possibilities of whether this app might be able to be used not only now, but as your child gets older, and if your child develops new skills, you want to be able to potentially extend the use of apps that you purchase. So we've given you an example of the Pictello app that really has such a wide range of possible features that really goes across different goals and different skill levels and lifespan. That's really one of the more versatile apps that we've come across. And let's demonstrate a couple of more that really have the potential to span either different situations or different ages or different skills. One of those is a visual timer app. There are lots of them out there. We're going to demonstrate the Viz Timer app. And we're also going to demonstrate an app called ChoiceWorks. So let's go first with Viz Timer.
So this app is called Viz Timer. And at this point in time, it costs $1.99, but the actual cost might vary at the time that you might decide you want to take a look and purchase it. And this is one of many different visual timer apps that are available. And some of you may know how helpful visual timers can be. It's really a visual and concrete way of showing the abstract concept of time and how long it might take for different activities to occur. So you might use this, for example, to show your child how much time it is until dinner will be ready, or how much time your child has to finish a task. There are any number of ways that you might use this. This app has a number of different ways in which you can customize for your own preferences. So let's take a look. We're going to press this little I button down in the corner. And you can begin at the top by choosing the length of time that you want the timer set for. So you can do 1 minute up through several hours. And then you can select whether you want a sound to mark the time when your timer has ended, and they have lots and lots of different calming or alerting sounds available. You also have the option of an early warning sound or an early warning visual reminder, letting you know, for example, in 1 minute your time is going to be up. So that warning sound or visual reminder might be helpful to letting your child know that things are about to end or about to be done. You also can choose what color the circle of the visual timer is. There are a lot of different options here for different colors and different gradations of colors. There's also an option to have a digital display of the time passing. So if you want it to read that there are 2 minutes left, 1 minute 59 seconds, etc., that can be in a small visual display as well as a larger visual digital display. And you can choose the color of the text for that large digital display as well. One more option for the Viz Timer app is the ability to disable the sleep mode. So if you were to turn this button on, that would prevent the iPad from logging off while the timer is working. So let's take a look at what we have set up. I'm going to press the start button. We have this set for 3 minutes and 1 second. And you can see that we have the large digital display in a bright purple color, and we have a yellow for the actual visual timer, and this yellow will be getting smaller and smaller as time goes, and by the time it's all done, the yellow will be gone.
So this app is called ChoiceWorks, and it's one of many apps that allow you to build visual schedules for your child. This one's nice because it has a couple of different options. So you can see there's a schedule board, a waiting board, and a feelings board. And I'll go through each of these in turn. We'll start off with the schedule board. So you can add many different schedule boards. As you can see, there are a lot of spaces by just hitting new, or you can edit existing ones by hitting edit, or you can use them by clicking on it. So this is what the visual schedule looks like in this particular app. You can have it go through and talk to you and read through each of these. In all honesty, the voice is a little bit annoying, so I won't have it read through this whole schedule, but it can also tell you as you click on each image.
Wait quietly. All done.
And drag it over to show visually that you're going down and completing these tasks. I also like it because it's nice that it gives you an option at the end to do something. So if you're having not necessarily a schedule for the whole day, but if you're having a schedule for a series of tasks like for homework completion or to do a chore, then you can have a reward down at the end that the child is working for. So that's kind of a nice way to situate these visual schedules. The other options is you can have a waiting board. I really like this one. It's a little bit unique, I think. And it shows the child what they're doing, for how long, and what they can do while they're waiting. So I'll have the voice talk to us.
I am not interrupting for 30 seconds. While I am waiting, I can blocks or color.
So you can see that this is a nice setup, and there are ways to edit
not
this.
Not interrupting.
Sorry, you press the edit button up here. You can delete them there's a little red minus that appears on each of the pictures, and you can delete them and then add a new picture. So the app comes preloaded with a lot of really nice visuals, and they're sorted into different sections so that you don't have the whole entire list to scroll through for each time you want to add a new visual. You can also add your own from a camera roll. So if you took a picture, and we would suggest in general that if you want to take a picture for any app, you back out of the application and use your actual camera on the iPad, because sometimes if you take a photo from within an app, then you can't access it in other apps. So that's just one tip that we have in general. So you can kind of see that you add a picture, you sort it into whether you want it to be the title, task, or activity in one of the schedule boards, and you can just check these. So you can decide whether you want it to show up as a skill or an activity in the waiting board, and then we also have the feelings board. So you can put it into any or all of these categories. We're going to cancel out of that though. And then for the waiting one in particular, it gives you a lot of choices for how long the waiting is going to be, which is nice. It kind of dovetails nicely with the visual timer, which we also demonstrate in this webinar. And then the same thing with these waiting strategies. You can go in and scroll through all of the different options and choose one. Okay, and that's how you edit not only the waiting board, but also these other two boards. Last, we have the feelings board. Looks about the same, and this is just a self-regulation strategy. So when I'm upset, I can count to 5 or get help, and then afterwards, again, sort of a reward or another calming strategy if a child is about to have a temper tantrum or kind of needs a little help to self-regulate in other situations. There are a variety of different feelings that you can choose from if you go into the edit. And again, you can add your own. Well, yeah. So you can see there. The other nice thing about this app is it has companion books, which you can either access from within each of the different boards, the schedule, the waiting, or the feelings, or you can access it from this main menu. So we're going to look through one of these really quickly. So there's one for the schedule, one for waiting, and one for feelings. They're pretty nice. They're kind of like little social stories that are already built in. And you just scroll through, and you can use it as a support for the different capabilities of this application. And then you can exit out of them at any time. And finally, there are some global settings that you can use, so you can turn on or off whether new boards can be edited. So if you're using it with a child, you might want to turn it off to prevent errant touches, kind of deleting things. You can turn off whether it plays audio every time you tap on one of the icons, and then you can turn off whether this little bitty eye appears in the bottom corner of the board. The other nice thing about this app is you can import boards, so there's a big library of them on iTunes already, or you can share boards. So say you made something that works really well at home, you could print it or email it to your child's teacher or therapist or grandma or grandpa. So that's really nice. You don't have to duplicate the work you've already done. And that is ChoiceWorks.
Myth number 7. Hey, this will be great. Our whole family can use the same iPad. Well, the reality is, if your child is actually using the iPad for communication, if this is the way that your child can let people know what he or she needs or what he or she wants, you really want the iPad to be dedicated just to your child. Think of it as your child's voice. You don't want to take that away. You don't want the iPad to be used, being occupied by somebody else when your child really needs it. And there are many speech-language pathologists who potentially help children with using the iPad as a communication device. And recommendation from many of them is that if your child is using the iPad as a communication device, they really are in many ways not verbal, you really want to use the iPad initially just in terms of communication and not in terms of using it for other goals or other activities like leisure and entertainment. First, get the iPad really useful and functional as a means of communication, and then think about using it more flexibly. The other thing to think about is if your child is using the iPad, perhaps not necessarily as a communication device, but really is using it for other skills that are important in their development. So perhaps for behavior regulation, like with the ChoiceWorks app, helping them with waiting or learning how to handle different feelings. You don't want your child to be having to compete with somebody else using the iPad. You want it to be available to them when they need it. You don't want them to have to fight another child in the family or pull it away to use it. You want it to be available when your child needs it. So it's not that it never could be shared with other members of the family, but there are some very good reasons to think about dedicating the iPad to your child and not having it be something that everyone in the family is using. Or you'd look into getting a different device or a second or multiple devices in that regard. All right, time for the next myth. Myth number 8. Okay, once I hand my child the iPad, I'm going to lose all control over what he or she's doing. Well, the reality is that there are a number of different control features available. One of the more important ones and helpful ones has just recently become available with the latest version of the operating system for iPads. Now, this is not available on the first generation devices, the first generation of iPad or the iPad 1 or those earlier iTouch devices. This is something called guided access, and it really is best explained and shown you, which we're going to do in a video in just a few moments. But some other built-in control features that are available are found on the settings feature of the iPad. So this would be one of the icons that is just built in, and then you go through and there are a lot of different available settings that you can enable or disable. And one of them that we would encourage you to disable is the possibility of those in-app purchases that I referred to earlier. So once your child is in an app, something pops up and says, oh, do you want to purchase this additional such and such? You want that not to be an option. So even if it pops up and your child says yes or clicks on yes, you want that not to be an option. It doesn't mean that you can't go in later and purchase that additional part of the app, but you don't want to end up with a bill that you don't know where it came from. And there also are some different apps dedicated toward giving you more control over what messages are sent out from your child, or if they're using it to contact other people. One example, and again, we're not endorsing this one, but just wanted to give you one possibility to look at what might be out there. It's called Mama Bear app, and this can give parents a lot of information about how their child is actually using their device when they're not around. Ultimately, it's incredibly important to go back to basic, old-fashioned supervision and monitoring. Unfortunately, what we found in our experience with some families with the iPad, and this is not specific to families of children with any kind of special need, but the iPad turns into a babysitter. And rather than the child having opportunities to work on social interaction or play interaction, the iPad is set up and used for hours and hours and hours on a daily basis. This is not only potentially not helpful, it can also even hamper or get in the way of your child's development. So we definitely don't want the iPad to be used to replace natural social interaction. Sometimes there is a thought that, well, my child is playing educational games or that's learning activities, and so that makes it okay. Well, to a certain degree, that would be true, but if it is interfering with some other goals, particularly around social interaction, that is a way that the iPad actually can end up hampering your child's progress. So be mindful of how the iPad is used. And for children who may be using the iPad to access the internet or to participate in some social networking sites that are available, it's important to directly teach your child about safety on the internet and safety on social networking sites. And of course, this is true for any child, regardless of whether they have any kind of neurodevelopmental disability. But it's especially important if your child may be more vulnerable than your average child. So here is a resource for you to take a look at some of those internet safety issues that we want to be especially mindful of for our children. So now I'm going to go and give you a video demonstration of the guided access capability that's available on the more recent iDevices and iPads.
So now I'm going to describe something called guided access. It's a new accessibility feature in iOS 6, which is the latest operating system for Apple devices, which means it's basically just a built-in option in every iPad that is using this system. Basically, what guided access does is it gives you the ability to control how the iPad is used when it's being used within any of the apps that you have downloaded onto your iPad. I'll show you how to set it up, and then we'll see it in action in one of our apps so you can get a better idea of what you can do. So you go to Settings. It's under the General tab. And from the top, you scroll down and find Accessibility. Scroll down a little bit again, and under Learning, there's this bar called Guided Access. Right now we have it off, and we're going to turn it on. So there are two things that you can do here. You can set a passcode, which will help you as the adult end the guided access so you can exit an app. So we're just going to set a passcode now. And this Enable Screen Sleep just lets you decide whether you want the iPad to log off during guided access or not. So we're all set to go right now. Now we'll go into an app and see how it works. For this demonstration, I'm going to use our First Words app, but it would work in any of these apps. Unfortunately, guided access doesn't work from this screen, so you can't restrict which app a child would click on, but once you're in an app, it gives you some nice abilities. So here we have First Words, and as you might remember, you can click on this home page to go back to the main menu. You can click on this forward button to skip a word. So if a child has a specific word that they might want to do over and over again, they could skip through to it and do it over and over again. And you might want them to be learning more vocabulary. You can also exit the app completely by pressing this home key. With guided access, you can restrict what the child can do within the app. So the way you activate it in an app is you press this home key 3 times really fast, and the screen shrinks down like this. There are a couple of different things you can do. So whenever you turn on guided access, all of the hardware buttons automatically are disabled. So that refers to this home button, so they can't exit the app. It refers to the button that turns off the iPad and the volume buttons. So they're frozen and cannot be accessed. You can also circle areas of the screen that you want to disable from touch input. So right now I'm going to circle these buttons that would enable the child to get back to the menu or to skip ahead to different words. And if I just want the app to run on its own, this will prevent the child from going back or scrolling forward. And then you can also decide whether you want the motion sensor to be on or off. I'm going to leave it on, I guess. And this is for apps when you shake it, it has some sort of functionality. In this app, that's not actually applicable. So then you hit start. And as you can see, the areas that I circled are grayed out and they're not going to work. So you can't go home, you can't skip ahead. I can still use the app just like I would otherwise.
F-O-X. Fox.
But I also can't use this button to exit out. And if I do try to, it requires a passcode. So if the child doesn't know the passcode, then they cannot exit out of the app. Once again, to turn off the guided access, all I did was click this 3 times rapidly, just like I did to turn it on, and you hit end over here in the upper left-hand corner. And then the app resumes its normal functionality, so I can use these buttons again. They're a little twitchy even without guided access. And I'm back to where I started.
So that is, again, a new capability on the iPad, and it's especially important for children who may tend to use particular apps or sections of apps in a very repetitive way, and you're wanting to encourage them to use more aspects of the different apps, or they're trying to get out of an app that you're really encouraging them to use. They're trying to get out of it and go back and look at a particular YouTube video or something else that is not addressing the goal that you're hoping them to work on in that particular time period. So let's move on here, and we are getting close to the end. This is our last myth that we're covering in this webinar, myth number 9. So this myth says the iPad is my only option, or another way to think about it is the iPad is undoubtedly the best choice for my child's needs. Well, hopefully by now you already know the answer, the reality for this situation. Maybe this is true, and maybe not. The message that we hope that you're taking home from watching this webinar is that you want to match whatever technology that you're going to use to your child, not the other way around. And how you determine whether a particular iPad or any other type of technology is appropriate for your child is by assessing your child's strengths, their areas of weakness, and the specific goals that you want to use the device to help you with. Now, perhaps in viewing these different specific apps that we've shown you, you're getting a sense that there are all kinds of capabilities within the apps that are out there. And it might be overwhelming to think about, oh, how do I figure out which app to get or what the capabilities are? How do I make it actually work for my child? That's a very realistic feeling and thought. And our recommendation really, ultimately, is to get an assistive technology evaluation or an AAC evaluation from a skilled clinician who's familiar, has expertise in using not only the iPad, but other devices that are available to help determine if the iPad really is the best choice, or if you already have an iPad, how you could use it to best serve your child's needs. So that is the bottom line. And hopefully the information that we've covered in this webinar will help you to be an educated consumer and have a balanced view of what the iPad may do for your child. So in conclusion, we have some more iPad-related resources that you may want to check out. We have some different lists of apps that are out there, that some of which get updated regularly and include different levels of specifics or reviews or topics of a different organization. to those different lists of apps. And then if you're interested in seeing another webinar that looks at the iPad and some other similar devices and looks at it from a different angle than this webinar did, the Autism Speaks website has a really nice webinar that's about an hour and a half long, so you might consider taking a look at that. And I want to, again, thank my colleague, Joe Risto, our speech-language pathologist, who helped me with the content of this webinar. And that's it from sunny Seattle. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, and thanks to everyone for viewing our webinar. Please remember to submit any questions for Dr. Johnson to coordinator@simonsvipconnect.org.